I know. So what's the time? Oh, yeah. A few minutes to go. A bit past. He's gone to find a whiteboard, but I did say only if it's easy.
It should be easy.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I like to draw things. So before we start, I have a question for you guys. Oh, here comes the whiteboard. Oh, God. Testing. And the question is, you've got two options really with this hour we have together. We can either do like a question and answer type session around mental health, what it is, what mental distress is, what resilience potential is, those sort of things. Or I can just do what I've planned. I've sort of planned to talk really about men's health, mental health, and the foundations of resilience. So one is me do a talk, the other one is me question and answer. So in terms of question and answer, raise your hand if you'd prefer that. Okay. Thank you so much. Unanimous. Okay, cool. If you not at all. I was just asking whether they. Do you mind if I sit? Because I had surgery recently, so I might start. If I pull faces, it's because of the surgery, not because of you guys. So my name's Tanya Kennard-Campbell. I currently work at Hyper, and what I do there is I help teams realise their full potential, and I do work around culture, but particularly around leaders and leadership teams. But my ancient history was as a mental health professional, so that's what I started my career as, and so worked in various different settings: inpatient, outpatient, crisis teams, assessments, and then not long into my career, I then got very interested in how do you change the perceptions of mental health professionals so we can support the consumer better. Because my experience was that often mental health professionals pathologized or looked for pathology or sickness and wanted to treat the sickness. And statistically, research-wise, that doesn't particularly help. Looking for the health and the potential in someone and drawing that out is a much better approach. So I got into change and how do you change people's who have quite fixed ideas. So mental health professionals can have quite fixed ideas. So that was my history. So I'm really here today drawing on that information and that knowledge. That's a bit about me. So in terms of mental health and men's mental health, I am a woman, so I don't know what it feels like to be a guy, but I have two sons and I'm very passionate about men's mental health. So in terms of mental health, men's mental health, men are doing it hard statistically. Women are overrepresented in the mental health statistics or mental illness statistics, but men are 3 times more likely to commit suicide than women. So very, very high statistics here in New Zealand for men. And why? The question, of course, is why? Why is that? What is it about guys and men that means that they have they're suffering such a lot that they commit suicide? So in my, talking from my personal experience and my professional experience, I've been, as a crisis nurse particularly, I went to many community situations where young men had attempted to take their life and had failed. And most always the shock of almost taking their life can change a man's opinion, if that makes sense. So they've nearly done it and then they realise what's happened. Men, of course, tend to be more impulsive and they do things more violently. So just generally men, in terms of statistics, are more disagreeable than women. And that's why they're more overrepresented in the criminal stats. but they are less compassionate than women. And I raise that because that compassion is about compassion to self as well as to others. So when it comes to any sort of mental suffering, they're less compassionate towards themselves and less likely to talk about it. Whereas women, being compassionate, and women are more extroverted in general, they talk about it. Men don't. I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Men are often lower in openness. So once again, men just don't talk. So in my career, working with young men, because I've worked a lot with young men, it's been my preference actually. Generally speaking, young men find it very hard to identify emotion or tell the difference between emotions. So when I say, how do you feel, they'll go, don't know. So being able to identify emotion, especially the subtleties. And even today, working with older male leaders, 50-year-olds, I'll say to them, how aware are you of your emotion, e.g., because I'm working with sometimes some quite explosive leaders. And they'll say, like, I'll go from being calm to losing the plot and have no awareness of anything in between. I don't know if you can relate to this, anyone in the room. But that identification of levels of emotion is less there for guys generally, statistically. Women are much more aware of their emotional state, which may be why they rank higher in the mental health statistics. Anyway, that's statistical stuff. What I really want to talk about is what creates recovery from mental distress, what human potential is and what resilience is. Because, sorry, playing with my mic. So mental health is basically our ability to feel emotionally and mentally well. And that is obviously a fluctuating experience. But how we are aware of our mental health and our resilience is via our feeling feedback system, right? So if we're feeling sad, you can use words to describe the different feelings that we have. Once again, with guys, women would say they're depressed and sad. Men often experience irritation and anger. That's how it's manifested, depression often in men, a sort of different manifestation. So it's not easy to identify depression in guys. So what I want to talk about here is the sort of psychological foundations of mental health, really, because in my career, there's been a lot of advice given to people around how to boost their mental health, how to realize their potential. And I guess some of you guys may be using some of those things like running, meditation, mindfulness, healthy eating, all these things that we do to kind of accentuate our psychological potential or our mental health. Now, they're great to a certain limit, but they're often around preventing yourself from feeling overwhelmed or reducing a feeling of overwhelm. They're not necessarily great at realizing your potential. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I want to, having worked with a number of people in my career who have suffered from some sort of event or upbringing that has really dampened their potential, I want to talk about a foundational characteristics of all humans, whether you're male or female, that literally overrides all that gender bias. And that really is the role of your psychological immune system. So I want to talk about that today, if that's hoping that'll be of interest to you guys. So the psychological immune system is this built-in system that we're all designed, hardwired to help us evolve. So this is really, and this has been a challenge for guys particularly, is it's built into our feeling feedback system. So what we feel, so our feeling, we like to call it feeling, but we can call it state of mind. You can call it attitude. You can call it emotion. All these things are the same thing. These things here are designed to give you feedback, right, about what is happening in each moment. Unfortunately, we've been taught that our feelings or our emotions or the way we're reacting is about what's happening outside of cells. So this is happening, and so I'm feeling. That happened, so I'm feeling or experiencing. So does that make sense? So what's happening outside of ourselves affects the way we feel. That's what we've been grown up to know. What that does is it means that we have to do something here. So if that's a person making us feel a certain way, we avoid that person, we manage that relationship, or we protect ourselves from that person. If it's a work situation, we feel we need to do something in that work situation to, influence the way we feel. And we have to do a lot of thinking about it to plan what we're going to do. So that's kind of like the mainstream view of where our feelings are coming from. And of course, this all leads to our feelings of resilience. Is that how you spell resilience? I can never spell when I'm talking. So resilience is our ability, well, the traditional concept of resilience is our ability to bounce back following adversity. So what happens outside of us affects the way we feel, affects our resilience, affects our mental health. So that's like the traditional, let me keep my eye on the time. That's our, that's kind of like the global view of the world in terms of mental health. So I'd like to just present to you, I would like to wrap that off, but I can't. There's nothing here. I won't use my hand, thank you. I'd like to rub that off and say that that's not how it works. Dum, dum, dum. That's not how it works. Okay, and this is what I do, what I used to do in my work, is help people understand this. That resilience is our ability to not be bound by circumstance or past thinking. That's resilience. So resilience is our ability to pivot in each moment and to grow and to decide what is the best course of action, not being limited by our thinking. So if you think about all the thinking that you may have that you're limited, that limits you. I was going to give you Post-it notes, but looking at the time, we haven't got time for that. So can I just ask you to pause for a minute and think about something? Can you think about the top 2 things that cause you stress, recurring things? The top 2 things that cause you stress in your life, in your world, in your work. And if anybody's brave enough, I'd like to, could you shout out, say 3 things?
Procrastination.
Nice, thank you. Workload.
It's like feeling of not achieving any. I don't know how to word that. Failure.
Oh, yeah.
But you still learn from failure.
Okay. So, with the old model that I've just drawn up, you'd probably have all sorts of tricks and trades that you do to try and overcome procrastination. With your workload, you'd manage it, you'd calm yourself down, you'd probably have a relaxing glass of wine or something after work. Am I achieving? You may have positive affirmations to yourself. You may go and get yourself a mentor. Fear of failure, maybe affirmations again. What else would you do for fear of failure? Share? Yep. So what really creates resilience is this feeling feedback system. So these will come with feelings, right? Feeling of procrastination, maybe tension, I don't know. It's not a nice feeling, procrastination, eh? It's just not nice. Overwhelm, doubt, fear, those sort of feelings. Well, would you agree? They come with certain feelings? Are you able to identify them? It's a question. States of mind, emotions, those things. So what I'm pointing to here now is the fact that feeling is actually a source of information, okay? It's not something that you necessarily need to manage or avoid. And intelligence. Great handwriting, eh? So feeling is a sense of intelligence. So I want to put this big word down here. It's a word called thought, right? Some of you may know this, some of you may not. But feeling comes from thought. Feeling and thought can't be separated. You can't separate them. So whatever you're thinking, you're feeling. So whatever you're feeling is pointing to what you're thinking, right? So the feeling is pointing to the source of information and intelligence that can help you, that help you overcome the feeling and to move forward. So for example, procrastination. The feeling coming from procrastination, the feeling that you're getting is not coming from the fact that you're procrastinating, it's your thinking about procrastinating. So shall I say that again? Okay, so it's not about, okay, I'll put that down. So thought is a constant for all of us, right? So whatever we're thinking, we're feeling. So our thought is creating the environment we're living in, our kind of mental health and our psychological potential. So whatever we think, we feel. So if you put that backwards, whatever we feel is coming from thought in the moment. So we hold a lot of past thinking. In fact, the majority of the thinking we're doing every day is thought we've had before, right? You know, research says 80 to 90% of the thinking we're having today we've had yesterday, which is pretty damn scary. So we're not doing a lot of innovative thinking. Understanding what feeling is and understanding it's coming from thought, what it does is it starts to help you to see that the feeling you're living in is coming from thought. It's starting to include thought in the picture, your thought. And that whatever that thought is, if you can see your thought in every minute, it's giving you the opportunity to see whether that's still true. So if 80 to 90% of your thinking is old, is this thinking still true in this moment? If you see what I mean. So this is our ability to realize our potential, is to see beyond what we're currently thinking. So in terms of psychological potential, fundamentally, psychological potential is our ability to have new thought, to realize new thought, see it, and for that thought to change you, right? For that thought to change you. Changing being it eradicates old thinking, e.g. the old thinking is no longer relevant, or it gives you new possibilities, so innovation. So that's where you learn to grow and to develop and realize your potential. And that's how it works. That's how we're actually designed to work. How it doesn't work is that our potential is contingent on circumstance, right? So I can't do this because of this. I can't do that because of that. Now, this is a kind of a harsh lesson because often we'll say, well, you know, there's reasons why I can't realize my potential because of my environment. But in this society, we have the ability to think differently, and we have the ability to speak out loud, and we have the ability to choose what we do with our lives. So how it works, how psychological potential works, is via thought in the moment. So those of you well, you think about the innovation you do and how you have to think about what to do next, what now, and when you're flying or in the flow state at work, you're literally in a place where thought is just flowing. And often you can realize and you can create things in that flow that you surprise yourself. How it doesn't work is via circumstance. So I just wanted to kind of point to that foundation, really, that thought in the moment, 10% new. So new thought is possible, only if you look for it, right? So next time, so one of the bits of advice I would give to anybody around how do I realize my potential? How do I actually harness the power that I have? Because I can guarantee that none of us here are fully realizing our true potential, right? We're aiming creatures, so we're kind of aiming towards that. But what helps is first of all becoming more and more aware of the feeling state you're in. Something that you can practice. Ask yourself the question, how am I feeling? What that does is it raises your awareness of the feeling state you're in. The minute you become aware of that feeling, if you can identify the thought behind it, very interestingly, you'll start to realize the patterns of thinking you're having. So when I asked you to label these things, the feeling that if these are regular things that you're thinking, this is the regular feeling it creates. So thought, what could the new thought be about that? So for example, procrastination is a thing, it's an experience. How you think about procrastination is actually the issue. That makes sense? It's not the procrastination, it's how you think about that. Workload. Workload is a thing, it's a real thing. But how you think about your workload is how you'll feel about it, e.g. stressed or not. Does that make sense? Is that making sense? My sense of achievement, it's not actually, it's how you're thinking about it. If you get awareness of what you're thinking about your sense of what you're achieving, that helps you understand what is helping you and what's not helping you in your own thinking. Are you following me? Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Tanya? Going back to the suicide thing.
Yeah.
There was a shock that happened.
Yes. Yeah. Hit this. People think it's going to be a certain way. People do not take their lives like, oh, I'm going to take my life. It's people are in a very bad state, terrible state. And then the shock of the near miss often stimulates new thought. So when I do my assessments, I look the person in the eye, and you can tell. You ask certain questions, you can tell they've moved beyond that depressed thinking.
What would be some of the questions you would ask?
Somebody who's just taken their life. Attempted to take their life. Well, I mean, ultimately, the first thing is, number one is always safety. So looking at the risk. So is there still a risk with this person? So you'd ask, you ask them what happened, what was your thinking, and they usually tell a story around why they wanted to take their life, and how they answer helps you understand whether that's like a serious mental illness, an ongoing issue, or more of a reactive thing, because people take their lives through, various different things. So that's really what I first off start doing, and then ask questions about the impact of the near miss. And usually, not usually, a number of times people are just like, I can't believe I just did that. I could have. So they start to, because when it comes to suicide, you're looking at the protective factors. So the things that are protecting someone's mental health, if they're very high and the risks are low, then that's a good thing. Protective factors are things like family, something that they have meaning or purpose around, religion, religious beliefs, all those things that protect people. Awareness, high awareness, support. Any questions, guys? I don't feel I did that justice, but.
So I've moved to New Zealand. I've been in New Zealand for just over 2 years, but I'm very aware that when I was living in South Africa versus living here, that the number of people that tell me here that they're going through mental issues is significantly more than out here in South Africa.
Wow.
And I'm just wondering if that, is that a thing, or is that just
It is a thing. It's a very high incidence, very high rate of mental distress in New Zealand to the rest of the world.
Is it just that they're talking about it more here than the living South Africa?
Possibly. The statistics are based on diagnosed or people who've been diagnosed with mental distress, so it may be higher, if that makes sense, because not everyone gets diagnosed. And when you're hearing that, is that from ladies or from guys, or both?
Both.
Wow. Okay.
I actually can't think of an instance where I've heard a guy in South Africa say that they were struggling. I can think of several conversations I've had with people here where I'm just in a bad place right now.
Wow. I think it's become more acceptable to talk about it now. There's been a lot of kind of media campaigns, especially aimed at guys, that have helped, I think.
So recently, I think I was one of the people that actually spoke to Mark about not feeling well and mentally unstable, depressed, and the things that we spoke about was like things that I loved doing and I enjoyed doing.
Yes.
I just wasn't doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I never even realized that I was feeling that way.
Yeah.
About a month or two, I just became
yeah,
a person who would sleep in really late, watch TV, not do anything, and it just was a cycle until I realized that maybe you are actually depressed. We actually went for a meetup that was around mental health in the workplace. And hearing somebody else's stories helped me realize that I'm actually not doing well, because I see these symptoms in myself. And knowing that I was feeling that way helped me change my thinking around what can I do to feel better.
Yeah.
And that circle is like a very tricky place, because you'll do it 1 day, 2 days, and then you're like, I can't do this.
Yeah, because the thoughts, the depressive thoughts are just horrible, aren't they? Just the things you hear that you say to yourself are pretty horrid. And that's, and if you think about that, of course, that makes sense that you feel that way, right? And so awareness is key. That's my thing about becoming more aware of your feeling state, because awareness is key. Because you can go down. Some of these guys that they weren't even aware. Just all of a sudden they just sort of, excuse me, fuck it. That's literally what I heard that so many times from guys. I just thought, fuck it. What's the point? But there'd been no kind of awareness of the deterioration.
I feel like an interesting thing that I used to. I'll be very honest here, because after speaking about it, I can be honest about who I am, not of experience. When I was back home, I'm also from South Africa, and when I was having a shit day, I'd phone up one of my mates and be like, let's go grab a beer.
Nice. Nice.
And you end up having a beer or two, maybe talking about it, maybe not talking about it, but then I felt like maybe that was suppressing what I was feeling and creating a worse off situation. Because I know that's a common thing when somebody has a really shit day, it's like, let's grab
Just
a beer.
to ventilate and or beer, yeah, beer to suppress.
What could be other coping mechanisms to deal with?
Well, it's looking at the shit day. Like, look at the shit day. I mean, what's the shit day about? Is it about your colleagues? Because so for me, I had postnatal depression, and then I had it intermittently for years after. I haven't, you know, I'm free of depression now for a variety of reasons. But when I really looked at it and really looked at why this kept happening to me, it was because I was holding myself in and I wasn't being myself. And I've got the kind of neurochemistry that doesn't allow that. I can't live a lie. I just can't. Some people can. Do you know what I mean? So I had to really, and that's tough. I really had to look at why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? You know, because some of us are super sensitive. It's a bitch, but that's not going to change. You have to see it for what it is. It's an intelligence trying to help you out. It's trying to guide you. You could do better. You could be doing differently. There's information here to look at. But, you know, support is required. Support is required because with depression, that's the risk. That's why it's dangerous. Because you can just go down. If you believe your thinking, which is why people take their lives, right? They see their thinking as truth. They don't see that thought creates feeling, and actually just because you think a thought doesn't mean to say that that's the truth. You don't create thought. Thought comes into your consciousness. This is why we have sometimes completely crazy thinking, right? Crazy thinking, creative thinking, boring thinking. If we followed every thought that we had, can you imagine how chaotic life would be? If we believed every thought we had. You know, and actually the path of health and our potential is actually to begin to discern and to understand this system for ourselves so you can harness it. And for those of us who have kind of gone a little further away from who we're meant to be in what environment, feeling is like the alarm system in a building. It's what it is. It's like warning, warning, but you have to understand the language, which is, it doesn't say you need to do this. It just says you're feeling this way, you're feeling this way. And the stronger it is, the more powerful that thought. And if it's a familiar feeling that's giving you a regular feeling, there's some thinking you're doing that you might need to look at. If that helps. But support is required. So getting some feedback around from your mate and also in the talk just kind of raised your awareness, right? And that's why I think, you know, we all need a support network who gives us feedback and says, you're not looking great. Do you need some support? We've become very isolated.
With the depression as well, you also feel like you're on your own.
Yeah, it is, yes. Yeah.
There's lots of people feeling this way, and that takes a lot of the edge off, I think. Because you think, oh, I'm not crazy. It's actually quite common with other people, and then you talk
Yeah,
about it.
true.
And I think that culturally, men and women have been brought up in a way that they talk about their feelings and women do. And
Yes.
so that's we want to stand higher because we talk about it.
Yes.
We will get to our girlfriends and talk to each other where you grew up with your mates and college. You know, talk about your feelings and do pretty shut down pretty quick.
Yeah.
Traditionally, I think it's getting better now these days. And my partner, he's South African too, and he's listening right because I'm sick at the moment. When he's sick, his internal monologue is get to work, be lazy. So
Yeah, yeah.
and all this, he's got it's a really harsh internal monologue. Me, get to doctors, you're not going to work.
Yeah.
He's very compassionate with other people, but when it comes to himself, it's incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite common in men, in that they're very compassionate when it comes to other people, but when it's inside their own head, incredibly harsh and isolating.
So you talking creates a different potential. Talking, asking questions, there's lots of potential there in terms of what you can learn, right? If you don't, the potential is more internal, if you know what I mean, because you can't realise it. Any other? 10 past nearly. I don't know if you stick to time or how's it? Oh, right. Sorry. Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
How do you become more aware of your feelings? So, for instance, when we're talking about procrastination or workload,
yeah,
I couldn't identify those feelings, but then
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, awesome. So a couple of things, what I do with the clients that I coach, you can do something daft like just put a blue spot on your computer or something to remind you. And every time you see that blue spot, ask yourself the question, what am I feeling? Just asking yourself, I know the first 12 times you may go, nothing, or hungry, or I've got wind. Because physical sensation often we're more kind of, well, some people actually, not everyone, are more in tune to be aware of, right? But every time you ask, consciousness is a very powerful tool, by the way. We all have human consciousness. And consciousness is our ability to be aware of. You start asking the questions, your consciousness will focus in that direction and it will start helping you out. So you'll have 90% of the old thinking, I don't know, I can't feel it. 10% of that is insight, okay, new thought. So if you keep looking, you'll start to become aware. So it just starts to happen. And then you go, oh, okay. So for me, when I started to learn about this about 10 years ago, I used to have pretty wild moods. I mean, not every day, but I could get quite euphoric and really quite low, right? So that was the range. And over time, what happened is the range of my emotion started to shorten. And then I remember one day asking myself that question, and the answer for the first time ever was neutral. The answer was neutral. And that was a completely new feeling for me. I had never in my life experienced neutrality. So, and then other new feelings I became aware of. So it's kind of like you become like more sensitive to it. And interesting, it doesn't make you more emotional at all. It just makes you more aware. Because you get the feedback really quick, right? Like I'm feeling upset here. I'm feeling angry here. It's really important that you see it because you can do something about it. If you don't see it, you can't do anything about it. So one of the leaders I coached, she was quite explosive. He'd be like, oh, so on his dial, 0 to 10, this is exploding in a meeting. I'd go, nothing here. Like he'd get to about a 9 and he'd be like, bang. That's when he'd notice it, when he was just about to say something. So he kind of went down the notch to about 7. And then he's like, oh, my wife's really good. My wife tells me what I'm getting because she recognizes it. But he got to a 7 in a year of coaching, which was better, right? Because that meant that he actually on a couple of occasions got up and walked out of meetings rather than created the damage that man created. And then he'd go away and feel terrible about it the next day, So he got to a 7. You might know him, Lynn. You might have worked with him. Yeah, well, I'm sure we've all experienced people like that.
I had a question, like with the introversion thing.
Yeah.
You're saying that females are generally more
extroverted.
Like personally, I do a lot of thinking, and
yes,
like, sometimes I think maybe I might need help, right?
Yep.
But I've never gone and seeked it.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Internalized it.
Yeah.
Like, what do do you think is like the first step in terms of actually like making that move?
That's a great.
I think, I think like I get to the realization, but then I'm like, oh yeah, I've realized it, and like I can do something about it myself.
The first part is realizing, and the fact that you've just spoken about it out loud is amazing. So introversion is not a bad thing. Once again, it's how you think about it. Really, it is. It's about how you think about it, and then other people will just follow suit in terms of how you think about it. People will treat you that way, generally, right? In terms of seeking help, it takes courage, right? It takes courage to take a risk, and it begins with having a conversation with someone that you see around you that you trust. And that's sensible. So it's not just picking anybody, because not everyone has the ability to be sensitive, right? Or to care. So one is picking somebody that you trust. The other thing is reading. There's lots of books out there, or even just branching out and getting yourself a coach. It doesn't have to be a counsellor. Like coaches are very, very good at drawing out your potential as well. My oldest son is it's interesting. He's a competitive swimmer, and he self-diagnosed introvert. And he used to say that obviously he's swimming 4 hours a day, so literally following the black line at the bottom of the pool. And he used to say, all you've got to do is to think, and that he thinks too much. But now he's in a completely different environment. He's in America, and he rang me and he said, Mum, I've realised I'm not an introvert. It was just my environment, you know. So there's nothing right or wrong about extroversion or introversion at all. At all. So it's just a bit of courage.
Like in terms of actually seeking help, like sometimes you don't know if you need to or not.
The fact that you've got a question in your mind would, once again, talk to somebody who knows you and trusts you. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you if that would be helpful. No. But I think what I'd probably do is trying to frame why you think you need help. Frame that in your own mind, and then test it with somebody who you trust. Or pay for a coach. Pay for one session with a coach, and they'll tell you very quickly. Because I mean, let's face it. If I asked everybody here who thinks that they're really at this moment have realised their true potential, they feel like they're realising their true potential, how many would put your hands up? Not many, you see. So we all have that sense of I could be doing more, I'd like to be doing more, or there's more to me. There's a thing called, you may have heard of Carl Jung, who's a disciple of Freud, and he talks about this thing called circumambulation. I don't know if you've heard of that. Circumambulation is a beautiful concept, circumambulation is the act of circling the divine, right? And he talks about the fact that we all have a future self that walks with us, right? And it circles us. And that future self is our true potential. And what it does is it talks to us, and it provides us opportunities to realize who we can be, right? Our future self. And he talked about the fact that it talked to us through our bodies. So like your body will light up when you're doing something that you enjoy. So things that you are attracted to, that appeal to you, that you're interested in, is this future self saying, this is the way. So yeah, I wanted to just sort of say that because I think that's quite a lovely concept. And in terms of this as well, same thing happens. So our potential to realize who we are and what we're capable of is via this feeling state. So the feeling that you may be experiencing is coming from thinking you're having. Like, look at the thinking. And that'll make sense. If you're thinking that, you'll be feeling that. It makes sense. So often with folk that I've worked with depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, they'll talk about their feeling and then pathologize it. But when you look at the thinking they're doing, it makes sense that they're feeling that way. But they've never looked at it that way. They thought, well, I'm feeling bad, I'm feeling bad, I'm feeling bad. Schizophrenia is an interesting one. People who can hear voices when no one's there, or see things other people can't. And once again, schizophrenia, I'm quite passionate about it actually. Schizophrenia is often dubbed as the worst mental illness you can have. It's hard to recover from. You'll always have to take medication. You'll be dependent. Your personality gets compromised. You deteriorate over age. Great prognosis. So this is why in my early career, the amount of times I'd have to drag a psychiatrist out of the room before he used those words with young men particularly. You've got schizophrenia. You've got schizophrenic voice. Do not use that word. Can you imagine somebody saying to you, you've got schizophrenia? Right? Terrifying. So I'd pull them out. Do not use that word, doctor. Because once again, some people hear voices outside of their head when no one's in the room. That does not make it a mental illness. It does not make it a mental illness. Right? It's how you think about that voice. That's the distress. That makes sense? If you take those voices seriously, if you follow them. So a lot of my earlier work was working with people who were voice hearers to help them develop, the way of putting it is develop a new relationship with the voice hearing. Oh, it's quite beautiful. So they still voice hearers, but not ill.
I'm just wondering, like,
Thank God, obviously I thought I was hearing
sometimes I'm so deep in thought and like
Yeah.
thinking to myself and I'm talking to myself in the third person.
Yeah.
Like I want to know if hearing voices is like a whole different sound.
It's taking that and putting it outside your head. So you can imagine you're hearing my voice now. That's what it feels like. So it's quite scary, and it can just start abruptly as well. So I don't know how some people are very conscious of their thinking. Some people aren't. We're all different, but I'm sure there are times when you've all been conscious of some pretty stinking thinking you're doing towards yourself. So you can imagine that outside your head and then taking it seriously. It's not pleasant. So it's kind of, so that was part of my earlier work, was trying to help health professionals turn the table on things like schizophrenia. And so one option, take medication for the rest of your life. Don't get into serious relationships. Don't push yourself at work. Or develop a new relationship with your voice hearing experience.
If you think about that, like it's a voice and it's almost like it's another person.
It is.
It's like having someone mentally abuse you.
It is. It totally is. It totally is.
So it's like,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, totally is.
Instead of but to change that relationship, instead of having someone mentally abuse you, you need that someone to tell you, hey, you're awesome. Hey, you look good. Hey,
Sometimes they do. See, this is what often happens with voice hearing, is you'll get two different. Well, just if you think about the range of possible thought, right? That is what they hear. But they often come in characters, if that makes sense. Well, if you think about the thinking that you hear as well, it's often character-based. So you can do it. It's kind of like comes with a certain voice. And God, you're such an idiot. And and voice hearing can either be one voice saying it, the same thing, or different voices, different characters, even people talking between themselves about you. Yes. So it's obviously it's a deal, but voice hearing is a thing. It's a thing. Any thoughts or questions, guys?
I've got a question. So when you said like if you are feeling depressed and stuff like that, feel first steps to seeking help is like talking to another person that you trust or paying a coach. What does paying a coach mean? And the other thing is, do you know how it works in New Zealand? Like, do you actually have to go see a GP first?
Yeah. Yeah.
Psychiatrist?
So there's two systems in there's private and then there's public. So private, just find someone, pay them. But the public system, you go to see your GP and say, and he'll probably do a Beck's depression inventory on you, which is a very similar, easy test. Yes, you've got depression, you know. And then they will offer you medication. That's another whole conversation. And you get, I think, 5 to 10 free sessions with a CBT therapist, cognitive behavioural therapist. So it's teaching you to change your thinking. It's a bit different to this, but there's some similarities. And that's free. And if you need more, then you can get more. And a psychiatrist is something different. So you'll see a psychiatrist if you've got serious mental illness. So it used to be that if you had a diagnosable Axis 1 disorder, which is depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar, but now, because the system's so overrun, you have to be risked yourself or others, basically, to see a psychiatrist for free. EAP? EAP? Yeah, that. EAP.
So it's a service where if you're struggling, you can just phone them and they'll provide counsel.
Employee assistance, yeah. So employee assistance program. So that most employers do have links to that, and you get that's free. Yeah.
Personally, I've used them and found them really useful, and it is free.
Yeah.
You'll have so many sessions, and it's all anonymous, so your work doesn't find out if it's you. They'll know someone who's used it, but they won't know who. And I've from personal experience,
And they're coachy, counselling based, so they're not necessarily about medication. So.
It's just someone to talk to that's completely outside your circle. Sometimes immediately having someone you trust that talk to is useful, but sometimes having some outside.
Totally, you don't know, yeah. Yes. Yeah, so it's kind of objective, which is really, really important because you can then just be completely honest and open with someone you know you might be holding bits back.
I was also finding somebody I know, like my sister, she drags me down quite a lot.
Right.
Like, oh, that's so awful.
Right, yes.
Depressive drama.
Yes.
And get you thinking into another space.
Yeah.
I actually try and avoid my sister. She tells me, and I try to get her into their thinking space. So I refuse to get dragged into the drama. So, you know, finding the right person sometimes a neutral, interactive section.
So the other thing was medication. Lloyd and I had a bit of a quick conversation in the car about medication. And this is my son, by the way, Lloyd. About medication and your perception, Lloyd, was that you know, once you're on it, it's hard to get off. You were saying, but so my point about antidepressants is they save lives. So let's not knock them. They literally save lives. And if you're feeling really bad, 2 weeks on antidepressants to see if it helps is really, you know, in terms of. But once again, there are side effects. So, I mean, so antidepressants save lives, they're wonderful, but they do not cure depression. They treat it. So you need to have antidepressants plus some sort of support, coaching, to help you understand, because a lot of it is around this stuff, so that you start to change the way you respond to your feeling state into life, and so that the mood doesn't get so low.
If you're coaching somebody, what's the frequency that you?
It depends on the severity. So I had a young man I met about 4 years ago, and he said, I'm feeling down, and I met him and I could just see, holy crap, he's bad. And so we did an intensive, which is a 3-day session. just to rejig his thinking, and he's now been depression free. So because he's learnt this, so it just depends. Once a week, twice a week, and then it starts to trail off as you get more resilient. Because, you know, the resilience is about when you feel down, or for some people high, because bipolar is the other way, or anxious, whatever, is when you're down there is what you do about it. Okay, if you think I'm depressed, that's it, I'm here forever. Here's depression, there's nothing I can do. The risk is that'll prolong it, right? But as you learn about this stuff, what starts to happen is, I'm feeling sad, or whatever the feeling may be, because as over time you get to refine it, like I said, and it's like, I'm actually feeling lonely. Now, lonely would not have been a word you would have used before coaching, because it was just depressed, if you know what I mean. I'm feeling lonely. I'll reach out to somebody. Or, I'm hurt because my sister is not who I wanted to, I don't know, whatever. And then up you go again. So it's not like, do you see what I mean? So it just depends on the person.
I've always thought to going for help to get back to neutral.
Yeah.
But the question I have is, can you get help to go past neutral?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm really passionate about. That's why I'm working now with leaders. So it used to be mental health. So it used to be about recovery from, and then then my next part of my career is about resilience. So building communities and building community leaders who could share how to develop the resilience of people. And then now it's about realizing potential. So I now work with particularly leaders and help them, because they're brilliant minds, but not necessarily realizing it. So yeah, any decent coach and get a recommendation rather than looking on the websites will help you with that bit too. Because you're actually just, what you're doing is you're aligning with, and kind of accelerating. I call it an unavoidable evolution. When you start to get really honed into this feeling thought thing, you start to become more aware of your thinking. You start to become more insight-led as opposed to thinking-led. Insight is new thought, innovative thought, possibilities. And it's like an unavoidable evolution, because you start, and the more you, like I said about consciousness, the more you look in a certain direction, the more you'll see in that direction. So for me, my whole world's been about human potential. That's where a lot of my insights fall. Some people, it's about software development. That's where the insights fall. You know, wherever you cast your attention is where you'll gain insight. So you start casting attention on your feeling, you'll start to become more aware. And it's fascinating how you start to become more aware of, like, loneliness. Loneliness was a thing way back then that I didn't realize that I was feeling. And it's like, I can do something about that. You know, like depression, what do you do about that? Looking at the time.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sure we all really enjoyed that talk. It's fascinating what you do.
It's fascinating.
So, thank you guys for coming. Got a little.
Oh. Is it lunch? Oh, thank you. Oh, that's lovely.
Some time with us. Yeah, very interesting.
Thank you.
I'll reach out to you sometime.
Yeah. If you've got any questions, I can put my email address up. Tanya at Hyper.
Okay. We'll post it.
Cool. Thank you.
Your email address.
Yeah, the Hyper one. I've got about 3.
Okay, maybe you can just.
Yeah.
And then.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. That was really, really insightful.
Yeah. Thank you.